Welcome to LKT Stories, a place to share stories full of emotions and surprises. Now, let's dive into this special story. I never imagined my life would lead me to this moment of reflection and inner conflict. My name is Clara, and I am 38 years old. For most of my adult life, I've lived what many would call an ideal existence. Married to Jacob, a successful businessman whose tireless work ethic has provided our family with a comfortable and stable life. Jacob is dedicated to his career, a trait I've always admired. His time is consumed by long business trips, endless meetings, and the constant hum of his phone and computer screens. I've been his unwavering supporter, fully understanding the pressures and responsibilities he shoulders. Yet, with every trip he takes and every hour he devotes to work, a strange emptiness quietly grows inside me, a persistent sense of deprivation and loneliness that I can't seem to shake. Our family includes our 20-year-old son, Eric. Like most young adults his age, he has an independent streak, craving freedom and the ability to carve out his path. After 2 years of college, Eric made the bold decision to leave school and enter the workforce. Despite our family's financial security, Eric chose to work at a nearby grocery store. This choice puzzled me at first, but I came to admire his determination to stand on his own and take responsibility for his life and his way. He works diligently, and his routine brings him home at noon, giving him time to rest from his morning shift. This summer, the heat felt relentless, pressing down on everything and everyone. The scorching temperatures seemed to seep through every crack and crevice of our house, turning it into a stifling oven. One particular morning was no different from any other. Jacob had left early for work, his briefcase in hand and his phone already buzzing with activity. As the door closed behind him, the house was enveloped in a heavy silence, the kind that amplifies every small sound and heightens every emotion. I sat alone in the stillness, the vastness of the house accentuating the solitude I felt so acutely. Around midday, the familiar sound of footsteps approaching broke the quiet. I glanced up from my seat near the window, where I had been staring blankly outside. Lost in thought, the door swung open, and there was Eric, his face flushed and glistening with sweat. His t-shirt clung to his chest, damp from the oppressive heat outside. "Mom, it's so hot today," he said, his voice tinged with fatigue as he placed a bag of snacks on the kitchen table. I couldn't help but smile at him, marveling at how much he'd grown. No longer the little boy who used to run around the house, but a young man navigating his own life. My heart swelled with a mix of pride and nostalgia. Eric headed to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of cold water. He unscrewed the cap and took a long drink before settling into the old wooden chair. In the corner of the room, the familiar creak of the chair mingled with the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan above. The only sounds in the room aside from the occasional soft thud of water droplets falling from the bottle onto the floor. We sat there in companionable silence, each of us lost in our thoughts as the summer heat wrapped around us like a suffocating blanket. The air seemed to shimmer, heavy with a weight of unspoken words and unexpressed emotions. The oppressive heat became unbearable for me that afternoon, and I decided to take a shower, hoping the cool water would provide some relief. As I made my way to the bathroom, I heard the faint sound of running water. I stopped in my tracks, momentarily confused. Taking a few more steps, I realized the bathroom door was slightly ajar, a narrow gap through which a soft, golden light spilled out into the hallway. My heart skipped a beat as curiosity and hesitation battled within me. Through the opening, I caught a glimpse of Eric standing under the cascading water. His back was to me, and his figure was illuminated by the soft glow of the bathroom light. Tom seemed to stand still in that moment as I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. I felt a rush of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and something I couldn't quite define. My heart pounded in my chest, and I quickly averted my gaze, overwhelmed by the situation. I didn't know why I hesitated instead of turning away immediately. But the intensity of the moment left me rooted to the spot. Suddenly, I moved back, accidentally knocking over a mop that had been leaning against the wall. The loud clatter jolted me back to reality, and panic surged through me. I hurriedly retreated to the living room, my breathing rapid and uneven, my mind racing, with thoughts I couldn't untangle. The silence of the house once again enveloped me. But this time, it felt heavier, late, with the weight of confusion and guilt. The scene unfolded before me with an intensity that I wasn't prepared for. There, standing in the bathroom under the shower, was Eric, completely naked. My heart skipped a beat, and in that moment, the flood of emotions that rushed through me left me paralyzed. Though he was my son, the sight of him in such a vulnerable, private moment made my heart race and my chest tighten. I couldn't understand why, but my body reacted instinctively as if something inside me had been stirred that I didn't want to acknowledge. My heart thudded in my ears, and my mind was overwhelmed by confusion, embarrassment, and a strange, inexplicable, fluttering feeling. Frozen in place, I tried to process what I was seeing, but my mind could not catch up. Eric was completely unaware of my presence, absorbed in the act of showering, leaving me to grapple with a situation I had no idea how to navigate. I knew I had to leave, to remove myself from that moment before anything else happened. But as I took a cautious step backward, my foot hit the mop, causing it to clatter loudly to the floor. The sound shattered the silence, and my heart skipped another beat in panic. Terrified that Eric might notice me or turn around, I didn't dare to look back. I bolted from the bathroom and ran to the living room, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I sank into the chair, my entire body trembling, as if I had narrowly escaped some sort of danger. The echo of the fallen mop rang in my ears, a constant reminder of what I had just experienced. What terrified me even more was the nagging worry that Eric might recall the noise and remember my presence, that he might somehow figure out what had happened. Or worse, what I had seen. For what felt like an eternity, the house was still. There was no sound of footsteps, no sign that Eric had noticed anything unusual. The silence only deepened my anxiety. Yet the image of Eric, drenched and exposed, continued to haunt my thoughts. I couldn't shake the scene from my mind. It played over and over in my head, each replay only making the confusion and discomfort in my chest grow stronger. Shame and guilt mixed in a way that left me feeling lost and disturbed. I tried to push the image away, pacing the living room in an attempt to escape my racing thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, the image lingered, relentless and unyielding. I was trapped in a cycle of confusion, unable to free myself from the unease that was consuming me. The sound of the water in the bathroom finally stopped, signaling the end of his shower. A few moments later, Eric walked into the living room, only wrapped in a towel, droplets of water still glistening on his strong shoulders. I couldn't look at him for too long, my gaze flicking quickly away in an attempt to avoid his eyes. But I could feel the tension in my chest building. The weight of the moment hung between us, unspoken but palpable. Eric glanced at me for a moment, then smiled slightly as if he hadn't noticed anything amiss. "Mom, did you hear something?" "I think something just fell." I felt the words rise in my throat, but they came out shaky, betraying the turmoil I was desperately trying to suppress. Mom dropped the mop. It's okay. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. I forced myself to sound normal, even though the words felt false. Eric didn't press further. He simply nodded, his expression shifting back to its usual calm, and went about his business. But as he left the room, the confusion, the shame, and the unease stayed with me. How could I move forward from this? How could I return to the same routine when everything had shifted in that single, impossible moment? After uttering those shaky words, I felt the tremor in my voice betray my inner turmoil. Embarrassed and flustered, I quickly turned my face away, hoping to conceal the anxiety and confusion that threatened to surface. Eric shrugged nonchalantly, as if dismissing the incident, and quietly walked back to his room, the door clicking shut behind him. The house once again fell into its familiar silence. But my thoughts were anything but. Still, the heat of the day seemed to intensify, blending with the confusing emotions that churned inside me. The haunting image of Eric lingered, refusing to fade, leaving me trapped between reality and the chaotic storm in my mind. I sank into the chair, burying my face in my hands, desperate to dispel the feelings that shouldn't have taken root. "Clara, what are you doing?" My inner voice screamed at me, filled with shame and fear. How had I allowed my thoughts to spiral like this? I wrestled with a growing guilt, trying to banish the inexplicable emotions that clouded my judgment. But despite my efforts, things had shifted. Since that moment, I found myself looking at Eric differently, and I hated it. I couldn't understand why. And even more so, I couldn't find a way to stop it. Time marched on, and the next morning began like any other. Jacob, true to his routine, sat at the breakfast table, hurriedly eating while his attention remained glued to the screen of his phone. He was already engrossed in emails and messages, his mind far from home. I quietly set the table, trying to keep my face calm and neutral, though a wave of sadness surged within me as he mentioned his next business trip. "It's going to be a busy one this time," Jacob said, not looking up from his phone. "I'll be gone for a full week." I nodded silently, accustomed to his absence, but still unable to shake the familiar emptiness that crept in every time he announced his departure. His brief forced smile felt like a hollow reassurance as he stood, gathered his things, and left the house. The echo of the door closing lingered, leaving behind an uncomfortable quiet. Eric was still sitting at the table, absently stirring his coffee. His expression was pensive, a touch of fatigue etched across his features. After Jacob's departure, Eric finally looked up, his eyes seeking a connection, searching for something unspoken. "Mom," he began, his voice careful, "I've got a week off from the shop. How about we go on a trip? It's been so long since we've done anything as a family." I smiled faintly, though the regret in my heart was hard to hide. Shaking my head, I replied, "Your dad is busy, Eric. He's on a business trip all week." For a moment, I saw a flicker of disappointment in Eric's eyes. He pressed his lips together as if holding back a sigh, then nodded slightly before standing to clear the dishes from the table. The quiet way he moved spoke volumes, and my heart ached. I could feel his longing for a trip, for time together, for something more meaningful than the patterns of distance and routine that had shaped our family life. After breakfast, the house felt quieter than ever. It was just Eric and me. I couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since I'd truly sat down to listen to him. Not just the surface level exchanges, but listen to his thoughts, his dreams, and his struggles. Somehow, life's currents had swept us both into separate streams, and we'd stopped noticing the distance between us. That afternoon, as sunlight poured through the partially open windows, Eric and I sat in the living room. A soft breeze carried the faint scent of summer, and warm rays danced across the carpet. It was a rare moment of calm. "Mom, I have a lot to tell you," Eric said, his voice deeper than I remembered. There was something sincere, even vulnerable, in his tone. I looked at him, encouraging him with a gentle smile. "Whatever it is, just tell me. I'm listening." He hesitated for only a moment before diving in, sharing stories from his job at the shop. He talked about the customers, some quirky, some kind, some difficult, and recounted funny situations that had made him laugh. As I listened, I realized how much I had missed these conversations. His voice was animated, his eyes lighting up as he relived the moments that brought him joy. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw the boy I'd raised, the curious, vibrant, spirit that I cherished. Time slipped away as we talked, the minutes melting into an hour. I felt the distance between us shrink, replaced by an easy warmth that I hadn't realized I missed so deeply. At one point, I teased him, "You're so grown up now. Have you thought about finding a girlfriend?" Eric laughed, a sound so genuine that it filled the room with life. "Mom," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Every time I walk down the street, the girls in the neighborhood practically stare me down." He chuckled, shaking his head, "But I'm not in a rush. There's plenty of time for all that." His playful response made me smile, but there was a note of seriousness in his tone too. We continued to talk, sharing memories of his childhood, laughing about family trips, and reminiscing about his mischievous antics as a kid. For a little while, the weight of unspoken emotions and unacknowledged tensions faded away, leaving behind something pure and simple, a connection between a mother and her son. "Mom, you won't believe the looks I get when I walk down our street." Eric chuckled, his laughter ringing through the cozy confines of our living room. His eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint, reflecting the golden afternoon sunlight that filtered through the sheer curtains. Every time I pass by, I can feel the neighborhood girls practically staring holes into my back. I looked up from the knitting in my hands, a soft smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. His youthful exuberance was infectious, and it warmed my heart to see him so full of life. "Oh, is that so?" I replied teasingly, arching an eyebrow. "Well, aren't you the popular one?" He grinned widely, settling back into the plush sofa. "Maybe I should start charging for autographs." He joked, his tone light, yet carrying a hint of genuine amusement. I shook my head, laughter bubbling up despite myself. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, superstar," I said, playfully swatting at his arm. "Besides, shouldn't you be focusing on your work first before entertaining any fan clubs?" Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're right, Mom," he conceded, though his eyes still danced with mirth. "Work comes first, but it's nice to know I've still got it," he added with a wink. We both laughed then, the sound filling the room and seeming to chase away any lingering shadows. The aroma of freshly brewed tea mingled with the scent of the garden flowers wafting in, creating an atmosphere of serene contentment. "Do you remember when you were little?" I began, my voice softening as nostalgia washed over me. "And we used to go on those family picnics by the lake?" Eric's expression shifted, a tender smile replacing his earlier grin. "How could I forget?" he replied. "Dad would always try to teach me how to fish, but I'd end up chasing butterflies instead." I laughed, the memories vivid and sweet. "And you'd come back with mud all over your clothes, insisting you'd caught a big one." If you're still tuned into this video and find a story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "I was quite the handful, wasn't I?" "Oh, you were," I agreed, my eyes twinkling. "But those were some of the best times, even when Jacob and I had to scold you for your mischief. We couldn't stay mad for long." Eric sighed contentedly, leaning back once more. "I miss those days," he admitted. "Things seemed so much simpler." A comfortable silence settled between us as we both drifted through the corridors of our shared past. The room was bathed in a warm glow, the sunlight growing stronger as noon approached, casting intricate patterns on the wooden floor. As the clock on the mantelpiece chimed softly, signaling the passing of another hour, I felt a sense of peace enveloping us. The invisible barriers that had once seemed to distance us were dissolving, replaced by a newfound closeness that was both comforting and profound. After a while, Eric broke the silence, his tone contemplative. "Mom," he began hesitantly, his gaze fixed on the view outside the window. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." I turned to face him fully, noticing the uncharacteristic seriousness in his demeanor. "What is it, dear?" I prompted gently. He took a deep breath before meeting my eyes. "Yesterday evening, did you by any chance come by my room while I was taking a bath?" The question caught me off guard, and I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. My mind raced as I tried to compose myself. I might have passed by. I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. A small, knowing smile played on his lips. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. I thought I heard someone, but I wasn't sure. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of embarrassment and an emotion I couldn't quite identify swirling. Within me, "I'm sorry if I invaded your privacy," I managed to say, lowering my gaze to avoid his penetrating stare. Eric reached out and gently placed his hand over mine. His touch was warm, sending a subtle jolt through me. "You don't have to apologize," he assured me. "There's something I need to tell you." I looked up, uncertainty clouding my thoughts. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Mom, I know this might sound strange, but I've been feeling something different lately," he confessed, his eyes searching mine for understanding. "It's hard to explain, but it's been on my mind for a while." A sense of apprehension settled over me. "Eric, you know you can tell me anything," I encouraged him, trying to ignore the fluttering in my stomach. He took another deep breath, his expression earnest. "I like you, Mom," he said finally, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Not just as a mother, but as someone I deeply care about, someone I love." Time seemed to stand still as his words hung in the air between us. I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "Eric, I don't know what to say," I murmured, my mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. He squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to say anything right now," he replied. "I just needed you to know how I feel." My thoughts raced as I tried to process his confession. A part of me wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to a momentary confusion. Yet another part of me couldn't ignore the sincerity in his eyes, or the way my own heart reacted to his admission. "Are you sure about this?" I asked quietly, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. He nodded solemnly. "I've never been more certain," he affirmed. "I've tried to deny it, to push it away, but the feelings only grow stronger." I withdrew my hand slowly, struggling to find the right words. "Eric, this is complicated." I began choosing each word with care. "What you're feeling might be a result of us spending more time together lately." He shook his head. "It's more than that," he insisted. "I've thought about this long and hard. It's not just a fleeting emotion." I stood up, crossing the room to gaze out the window. The garden outside was in full bloom, a riot of colors that seemed to mock the turmoil inside me. "We have to consider the implications," I said, my back turned to him. "This could change everything." He stood as well, moving to stand beside me. "I understand the risks," he acknowledged, "but I can't pretend anymore." I turned to face him, meeting his earnest gaze. "Eric, you're my son," I whispered, the words laden with both affection and concern. He reached out to gently brush a stray strand of hair from my face. "And you're the most important person in my life," he responded. "I don't want to hide how I feel." A myriad of emotions flooded through me. Fear, confusion, a forbidden thrill. "This isn't right," I protested weakly, even as I found myself drawn to the depth of his eyes. "Maybe not," he conceded softly. "But does it feel wrong?" I closed my eyes, taking a moment to steady myself. "I don't know," I admitted. "Everything is so confusing." Eric's hand lingered near my cheek, his touch sending a warmth coursing through me. "I just want you to be happy," he murmured. "Tell me what you want, and I'll respect your decision." I opened my eyes to find him watching me intently, his expression open and vulnerable. The weight of the moment pressed upon me, and I knew that whatever I chose would irrevocably alter our relationship. "I need time," I said finally, my voice barely more than a breath. He nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need," he agreed. "I'll be here." The days that followed were a blur of introspection and silent contemplation. I found myself replaying our conversation over and over, dissecting every word, every glance. The familiar routines of daily life seemed distant, overshadowed by the gravity of the unspoken tension between us. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, I found Eric sitting alone on the back porch. His silhouette was outlined against the fading light, a picture of quiet solitude. "Mind if I join you?" I asked softly. He turned a faint smile, touching his lips. "Not at all." I settled into the chair beside him, the wooden planks creaking softly beneath me. For a while, we sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars began to emerge. In the twilight, "Eric," I began, my voice breaking the hush of the evening. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." He glanced over at me, his expression attentive, and I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "What you said the other day, it took me by surprise," I admitted, "but I can't deny that there's something between us." He remained quiet, allowing me the space to continue. "But we have to be careful," I cautioned. "This path is fraught with challenges, and I don't want either of us to get hurt." He reached out to take my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. "I understand," he said gently. "We could take things slowly." A sense of relief mingled with a lingering apprehension. "Thank you," I whispered, grateful for his patience. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop the 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. As weeks turned into months, we navigated the delicate balance of our evolving relationship. When Jacob was away on business trips, the house that once felt too large for just the two of us became a haven for shared secrets and stolen moments. We would spend evenings engrossed in conversation, delving into topics that spanned from the mundane to the profound. Our connection deepened, each interaction layering upon the last, building a bond that was both exhilarating and precarious. One rainy afternoon, as the soft patter of raindrops drummed against the roof, Eric found me in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. "Smells good," he commented, leaning against the doorway. I glanced up, smiling softly. "It's your favorite chicken pot pie." He crossed the room, stopping just a few steps away. "You always remember," he said appreciatively. "Some things are hard to forget," I replied, stirring the pot absent-mindedly. He took a step closer, his gaze intent. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," he said, his tone serious. I set down the spoon, turning to face him fully. "What is it?" He hesitated briefly before speaking. "I've decided to take a job offer abroad," he announced. "It's a great opportunity, and I think it might be good for both of us to have some space." The news hit me like a cold wave, and I felt a pang of loss. "When did you decide this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just recently," he admitted. "I think it might be the best way to sort out my feelings, and maybe give you a chance to do the same." I searched his face, noting the conflict mirrored in his eyes. "If that's what you think is best," I said slowly. Though my heart protested, he stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "I don't want to leave you," he confessed, "but I also don't want to complicate your life any more than I already have." I reached out to touch his cheek gently. "You've brought me more joy than you realize," I told him, "but perhaps some time apart will help us see things more clearly." He covered my hand with his own, leaning into the touch. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," he urged. "I will," I assured him. "And you do the same?" The days leading up to his departure were tinged with a bittersweet melancholy. We cherished the moments we had left, each interaction laden with unspoken sentiments. On the morning of his flight, I drove him to the airport. The journey was filled with comfortable silence, the weight of farewell heavy between us. As we stood by the departure gate, he turned to me one last time. "Thank you for everything," he said earnestly. I pulled him into an embrace, holding him tightly. "Take care, Eric," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He hugged me back, his arms strong and reassuring. "I'll be back," he promised softly. As I watched him walk away, a mixture of sadness and hope welled up inside me. The path ahead was uncertain, but perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. In the months that followed, we kept in touch through letters and occasional phone calls. The distance allowed us to reflect and grow individually. I found solace in rekindling old hobbies and immersing myself in painting and gardening. One day, a letter arrived from Eric. His words spoke of new experiences, personal growth, and a budding sense of clarity. He expressed gratitude for the time we had shared and hinted at a possible return in the future. As I folded the letter, a gentle peace settled over me. While the future remained unwritten, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it with the understanding and maturity that had blossomed between us. Our story was one of complexity and depth, a testament to the intricate tapestry of human emotions. And though the path we had walked was unconventional, it had led us to a place of mutual respect and profound connection. The accidental touches, the fleeting moments of connection that felt so wrong yet so intoxicating, haunted me every day. A constant inner conflict consumed me, guilt battling with forbidden longing. Each stolen glance, each brush of fingertips, only deepened the torment. I knew this path led nowhere good, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Eric and I shared moments steeped in emotion, moments we both knew should never have existed. Yet they were there, real, undeniable, and filled with a complex mixture of passion and remorse. Then, one afternoon, the fragile balance we had managed to maintain was shattered. Jacob came home earlier than expected. The familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt of panic through me. The rattle of keys at the door felt like a ticking time bomb. Eric and I sprang apart, our eyes wide with fear and guilt. The door swung open, and there Jacob stood, his face weary from the day, but his eyes sharp, scanning the room. He looked at us, his wife and his son, with a flicker of suspicion that made my stomach churn. The air was thick with tension, a palpable silence pressing down on all three of us. Jacob said nothing, but the weight of his unspoken questions was unbearable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the sound deafening in the otherwise quiet room. The precarious nature of what we had been doing hit me with full force at that moment. This had to stop. The emotional chaos and the tightrope we were walking could not hold. It was a path leading to irreparable destruction, not just for me, but for our entire family. That night, as the household settled into a tense, uneasy quiet, I made a decision. I had to end it. I had to find the strength to put an end to something that was spiraling further out of control with every passing day. So the next evening, I asked Eric to meet me on the porch. The warm glow of the porch light cast a soft hue on his face, but his eyes were clouded with emotion, confusion, longing, and sadness. "We can't do this anymore. Eric," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling under the weight of the words. I paused to steady myself. "I love you, but as a mother should love her son. Nothing more. Anything else would only hurt us both. It would destroy everything we hold dear." Eric looked down, his hands clenched into fists. I could see the struggle etched across his face. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, finally, he nodded, a deep sigh escaping him as if releasing a burden he had been carrying for far too long. His shoulders slumped and the light in his eyes dimmed. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice tinged with sorrow. "I don't want to hurt you or anyone else." The pain in his voice was unbearable, but I knew this was the right choice. Our relationship, such as it had been, ended that evening with no dramatic declarations, no angry words, just a quiet, shared acknowledgement of the inevitable. Jacob, thankfully, remained oblivious to what had transpired. I poured my energy into mending the cracks in our family, spending more time with him, and rebuilding the trust that had eroded in ways I couldn't fully explain to him, or even to myself. Eric chose to leave home for a while, seeking the distance he needed to find balance and clarity to start anew. His absence left an ache in my heart, but it was a necessary step for both of us to heal. In the days and months that followed, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The mistakes, the emotions, the consequences. I realized how loneliness and an aching need for connection had clouded my judgment and led me down a path I should never have walked. There were hard lessons to be learned from the experience, lessons I wanted to share with others who might find themselves in similar situations. Face your loneliness and understand its root cause. There were times when I felt consumed by loneliness and emptiness, and I sought comfort in ways that weren't healthy or right. I learned to ask myself why I felt that way and began working on the root of those feelings, instead of seeking fleeting solace in the wrong places. Maintain boundaries and respect your self-worth. Boundaries are crucial in any relationship. Respecting yourself and others helps prevent choices you may later regret. I realized too late how blurred lines can lead to confusion and pain. Prioritize communication and connection. If you're feeling isolated or disconnected, open up and communicate. Sometimes the simple act of talking honestly with your partner or loved ones can clear up misunderstandings and rebuild bridges. Forgive yourself and allow growth. Mistakes are a part of life, but wallowing in guilt won't help. The hardest part for me was facing my regret, but forgiving myself was the first step toward healing and moving forward. Cherish what truly matters. Love and connection with those who genuinely care for you are priceless. Don't let temporary emotions or fleeting desires jeopardize what's truly important. Looking back, I still carry a sense of regret and sadness, but I also feel a profound gratitude for the lessons learned, letting go of what should never have been allowed me to rediscover the value of the relationships that truly mattered. The process of rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was necessary for myself, for Jacob, and for Eric. Healing is a journey, not a destination. And with every step, I find myself moving closer to a place of peace and understanding. Life, after all, is about learning from our missteps, growing stronger, and finding the courage to choose the right path, no matter how difficult it may be. The story of lktstories ends here. If you find this story interesting and worth pondering, please support us by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the story with people you think they need to hear. Don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments section, because we always appreciate all your feelings and thoughts. Your sharing is the motivation for us to continue bringing more interesting stories. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.